Alright, let's get started with this month's update. First thing is the quantum mechanics Mafia. Last month I talked about this new technique I was thinking of using to learn math as a group using this funny format. And so I actually, got a group together and we're doing it. So we've got this group of 9 people. We're all working together, learning modern physics from first principles. But the really nice thing is that we're learning it enjoyably. So we're just having discussions about the things we're learning and try to really get deep into the intuition into why something is true, not just accepting it as a fact. And so we're now in our 5th week, and so that's going really well. And I'll link the webpage over here in case you guys are interested to read more about it. But that's something I'm very proud about, and I plan on to keep on doing this for the next year, the next 5 years. This is something that's just happening, and I plan to keep on doing in the background for a long period of time, and just picking up math through exposure to it every week, instead of cramming for a test and having very specific classes that limit creativity. This is very, very, very creative. So a second thing that I'm working on is skill tree. And the idea here is that I used to be a gymnastics coach. And at the time I also played these video games like Civilization and Hearts of Iron, where you had these technology trees. The idea is that I realized that gymnastics is very similar to those video games, because you might start off with something like a dive roll and then move on to a flip and then a flip with a twist, and then gymnastics is just very graph-like, I guess you could say. And so what I'm doing with a friend of mine is we're making a software package for gyms to use to track their athletes' progress and other nice features too. An interesting thing is that I am a user of this product, so I know what I want as a user, and I'm just going and implementing them. Funnily enough, in Rust, or in Rocket Rust, which is this web framework written in Rust. Yeah, my favorite programming language. That's a lot of fun. Third thing is I am considering forming a group with a similar philosophy to the Quantum Mafia, but instead for learning what I call real programming. It's not too difficult to learn normal programming. So when I was, a lot younger, I was learning, all these kinds of Python, JavaScript. But there was always something missing, which was the environment setup. I remember very specifically trying to set up Python, trying to publish some project I was working on using Django. I don't know, it was a mess, and the environment setup was just the absolute killer. And there's just a lot of other cool things that are included in the programming world, but that you're not taught these things. You're expected to just pick them up through exposure. And so I'm considering forming a group of people where we would explicitly go and enjoy ourselves and create art. I'm stretching the definition of art here, but the idea is that we would just be creative with the type of cool things that we can do with programming. One thing is I was recently able to connect my phone, or a terminal on my phone, to my desktop at home, which is just cool stuff like that, So yeah, forming a group about that kind of stuff. And some other stuff too, experimenting with Linux distros, using Git properly and understanding what's going on behind the scene. Deploying a website, that's a big one. I've had a lot of trouble in the past deploying websites until now I've taken the effort to learn this stuff. So maybe just forming a group of 6 to 8 people dedicated to learning this stuff for a few months. And another thing is a pivot I've made from origins of life research into quantum simulations, specifically quantum simulations of chemistry. Now, I've always enjoyed working with things related to simulations. So originally I did some work in fluid simulations and ended up making my own fluid simulation from scratch using Rust. And then I moved on to molecular dynamics. I was using some packages and making some small projects. But now I've pivoted to simulations using quantum computers. And the idea there makes sense to me on a first principles level, which is that if we're trying to simulate, for example, molecules or proteins very accurately without any assumptions that might ruin the accuracy of our prediction, we need to simulate molecules on a quantum level. And classical computers have a very hard time simulating these kinds of interactions, whereas quantum computers have a lot more hope. And so the idea there is I'm exploring what's going on. I'm working with some frameworks right now, so doing some work with Circ and with Bracket, which is Amazon's package and Google's package. And eventually I'd like to be doing, different experiments, making some projects. One interesting thing I am planning to write is a comparison between graphics APIs and quantum APIs. And so I did a lot of work in the past when I was working with fluids using Vulkan and OpenGL, those two APIs. And I find it interesting that perhaps there are some lessons that quantum APIs can learn from those two APIs. And another thing is that all of these packages are written in Python, which is understandable because it's a very pleasant language. But I think a nice side project for myself will be to rewrite these packages, or at least the core subset of the package in Rust, which is of course my favorite programming language, just for fun and to really understand what these packages do at a first principles level. Eventually I'd like to, use this software approach as my way into the quantum world. So it's a way I can be useful to the team of people working on quantum simulations right away, making these packages with Rust, because the alternative for speed is C++, which is of course not memory safe and has all these other problems. So that's the idea. And final thing is that I am unfortunately leaving Salt Lake City, this beautiful place, and I'm returning to Toronto in a few weeks. So yeah, unfortunately going to be missing this place. Made a lot of really good friends here, very hardworking people, very productive, very ambitious. So I'm going to miss all these people. And Edify is planning a couple of more residences where people will be able to live together as a group, specifically in San Francisco, in Seattle, and in Brooklyn, I believe. And so, of course, check out the Edify website if this kind of co-living experience is the type of thing you'd be interested in. But yeah, that's what I wanted to talk about. That's my monthly update. Thanks for checking it out.